Chapter 1. The Gap of Gaping Void. Before the green earth was shaped, before the vaulted sky was lifted high, there was nothing but Ginnunga Gap, a vast, silent, and gaping void that stretched without end into the blackness. No stars flickered in the emptiness. No waves beat against a shore, and no breath of wind stirred the heavy, hollow quiet of the primordial dawn. To the far north of the void lay Niflheim, a world of absolute ice, frozen mists, and venomous cold. From its central spring, Hvergelmir, 12 frozen rivers roared forth, spilling into the abyss. The waters froze layer upon layer, filling the northern rim of Ginnunga Gap with heavy, leaden sheets of glaciers and rime that grew thicker with each passing age. But to the far south lay Muspelheim, a realm of intense, burning light and furious heat, a glowing crucible where the air itself sparked and danced with embers. At the border of the fire world sits Searcher, the giant of the blazing blade, waiting since before time began. The heat from his realm began to drift northward, a blowing gale of sparks that met the frozen walls of the abyss, causing the ancient ice to groan and tremble under the sudden warmth. Where the fierce heat of Muspelheim touched the rime of Niflheim, the ice began to thaw, dripping drop by drop into the center of the gaping void. Out of those melting drops, quickened by the warmth, life first quickened in the dark. The colossal form of Ymir, the first frost giant, emerged from the vapor. Beside him rose Audumla, the great cow of the dawn, whose milk nourished the giant, and whose tongue licked the salty ice blocks until the first of the gods was uncovered. From this chaotic meeting of fire and ice, the seeds of the universe were sown, setting the stage for a violent clash of elements that would shape the 9 worlds. The frost was breaking, and the first beings had awakened. Now, the time of raw creation had ended, and the hour of the great shaping was about to begin. Chapter 2. The Flesh of Ymir. Ages pass in the shadow of the void until Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, rise up against the massive, lawless frost giant Ymir, unable to endure his chaotic rule over the primeval soup. They slay the ancient giant in a fierce, brutal struggle, and a massive torrent of Ymir's dark, icy blood bursts from his wounds, drowning nearly the entire breed of frost giants. The young guards haul the colossal corpse of Ymir into the very center of Ginnunga Gap, using his broken limbs and torn flesh as the mortar to build the physical universe. From his heavy flesh they mold the flat, vast circle of the earth. From his unyielding bones they shatter the towering ridges and mountain crags. And from his teeth and shattered jaw fragments they scatter the gravel and stones. Odin lifts Ymir's massive skull with his bare hands, throwing it high above the newborn earth to form the great, curved dome of the sky. He stations 4 sturdy dwarves, Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri, at the 4 corners of the world to hold up the heavy skull against the weight of the outer darkness. Then, gathering the stray sparks and glowing embers blowing from the fires of Muspelheim, he flings them into the vault to create the stars, the sun, and the changing moon. The gods look upon the wide world they have carved, taking Ymir's brains and scattering them into the winds to create the dark, heavy storm clouds that drift across the sky. Around the outer rim of the flat earth, They pour Ymir's vast bloodline to create the deep, roaring salt sea, an impassable barrier to keep the remaining giants at bay. To further secure the center, they take the giants' thick eyelashes and weave a massive, fortified wall around a fertile inner realm, naming it Midgard, the middle yard, where human life will one day flourish. Under the newly lit stars, the cosmos begins to take on a grand structure, anchored by a massive tree, whose roots sink deep into the hidden corners of existence. The raw scaffolding of the world was fixed, but the universe required a spine to hold the realms together. Now, out of the primordial soil, the great ash tree, Yggdrasil, begins to spread its mighty boughs, connecting the 9 distinct worlds of gods, giants, and men. Chapter 3: The Spine of the Cosmos. Out of the center of the newly shaped earth rises Yggdrasil, the great ash, the mighty world tree, whose trunk forms the unbreakable spine of all existence. Its massive branches weave through the clouds, spreading far above the highest heavens, while its 3 colossal roots plunge deep into 3 separate realms, anchoring the universe against the howling void. The first root sinks into Niflheim, drinking from the roaring, ice-cold waters of the spring Hvergelmir. There, curled in the absolute darkness, lies Niflheim, the dreadful malice serpent. With a sharp, heavy, and gritted patience, the beast tears at the ancient root, eager to see the great tree collapse into ruin. The second root searches out Jotunheim, the barren land of the stone giants, where it drinks from Mimir's well, a deep pool harboring absolute universal wisdom. Mimir guards his waters with an unyielding, fierce pride, demanding a heavy price from any who seek a draft. Even Odin, the Allfather, had to gouge out his own right eye and drop it into the dark depths of the water to gain a single sip of its profound hidden sight. The third root ascends to Asgard, the radiant citadel of the Æsir gods, drawing sustenance from the sacred well of Urður. Beside this well sit the 3 Norns, Urður, Vörðandi, and Skuld, the ancient sisters of fate who weave the threads of life for every mortal and god. Every morning, with frantic and meticulous care, they splash the tree's bark with the well's holy water and white clay, keeping the giant ash from rotting or breaking under the weight of the 9 distinct worlds. High up in the topmost bough sits a wise golden eagle, watching the movements of the universe with a cold, piercing gaze. Between the eagle above and the serpent below scampers Ratatoskr, the malicious squirrel of gossip. He carries insults up and down the rough bark, keeping the elemental forces of the tree locked in an endless, biting feud, while the great ash holds the cosmos steady. Chapter 4: The Pillars of Heaven and Earth. With the great world tree firmly rooted, the architecture of the cosmos aligns into 3 vast stacked tiers, separating the forces of light, order, and primordial chaos. On the highest tier, glittering above the clouds, lies Asgard, the golden fortress of the Æsir gods, where magnificent halls with roofs of gilded shields pierce the sky. Beside it sits Vanaheim, the peaceful, fertile home of the Vanir gods, masters of wind, sea, and natural magic. And nearby lies Alfheim, a radiant land of absolute light, where the luminous light elves dwell, their beauty brighter than the noon sun. These upper realms are locked in an unyielding, fierce authority, ruling over the lower worlds. On the middle tier sits Midgard, the circular earth carved from Ymir's flesh, where the first human couple, Ask and Embla, wake to life beneath the stars. But just beyond the great ocean wall lies Jotunheim, a bleak, rocky wilderness of jagged mountains and whistling gales, where the frost giants nurse a sharp, heavy, and gritted hatred for the gods. Deep beneath the earth's crust is Nidavellir, a labyrinth of dark caves and smoking forges, where the master smith dwarfs shape gold and iron into weapons of immense power. On the lowest, darkest tier lie the primordial foundations, anchoring the roots of the world tree in ice and flame. There lies Niflheim, the choking desert of frost, and Helheim, the silent grey kingdom of the dead, ruled by the half-living, half-decayed goddess Hel. And in the south remains Muspelheim, a furious, burning cauldron of ash and fire, where the ground constantly shakes and the sparks fly upward like a swarm of angry hornets. To connect these vast and separate tiers, the gods weave a shimmering, three-stranded highway across the sky, anchoring the citadel of heaven to the fields of men. The 9 realms were fixed, but they required an entrance and a guard. Now, spanning the gulf between Midgard and Asgard, the burning rainbow bridge, Bifrost, begins to glow, lit by an absolute fire that no mortal foot can ever cross. Chapter 5. The Burning Bridge and the Watchmen. Spanning the great chasm between the highest heavens and the fields of Midgard glows Bifrost, the shimmering, three-stranded rainbow bridge woven from light, air, and primordial magic. It is a trembling, radiant highway across the sky, yet its beautiful colors hide a fierce and lethal defense. The red band of the rainbow is a roaring, unquenchable fire designed to burn the feet of any frost giant who dares attempt to storm the gates of heaven. At the highest point of this bridge, where the rainbow touches the borders of Asgard, sits Himinbjörg, the Sky Castle. Here dwells Heimdall, the White God, the sleepless watchman of the Æsir. He rules his post with an unyielding, fierce authority, stationed by Odin to ensure that the ancient enemies of order never breach the celestial wall without a veil of warning. The gods have gifted Heimdall with senses that defy the boundaries of nature, making him an absolute, flawless sentinel against the forces of chaos. He needs less sleep than a bird. His eyes can pierce the deep darkness for 100 leagues in every direction. His hearing is so sharp, so frantic, that he can hear the wool growing on the backs of sheep in Midgard, and the green grass pushing its way through the damp clay of the earth. No shadow can move, no blade can turn without his keen sight locking onto the threat. At his hip hangs the Gjallarhorn, the resounding horn, whose devastating blast can be heard through all the 9 distant worlds of the cosmos. The watchman keeps a silent, heavy, and gritted vigil, his gaze forever fixed on the jagged mountain passes of Jotunheim. He knows that one day, the fire giants of Muspelheim will mount their steeds, and the iron bridge will crack beneath their immense weight. Until that dark hour, his hand rests on the horn, keeping the gods secure in their golden halls. With the bridge guarded and the tiers of the cosmos aligned, the 9 worlds enter a golden age of stability. though the threads of fate spun by the norms carry a lingering whisper of ultimate destruction. The architecture of creation was complete, and the realms were safely locked behind walls of stone and fire. Now, the cosmic clock begins its regular tick, as the sun and the moon take to the skies, chased by a terrifying hunger that ensures they will never slow their stride. Chapter 6. The Chased Chariots. High above the vaulted dome of Ymir's skull, the cosmic clock begins its relentless, eternal pulse as the gods place the sun and the moon into golden chariots. Sol, the radiant maiden, drives the horses of the sun, casting a brilliant light across the flat earth, while her brother Mani guides the silver chariot of the moon, marking the changing months for mortals below. Yet theirs is no peaceful journey across the celestial highway. They are locked in an unyielding, fierce, and frantic race, driving their steeds with a furious pace that allows no time for lingering hesitation. For behind them, leaping through the dark spaces of the sky, run the two colossal wolves of the wilderness, Skell and Hati, born from an ancient giantess in the iron wood. Skell pursues the sun with open jaws, his hot breath singeing the golden reins, while Hati hunts the moon, eager to tear the silver driver from his seat. The chase is frantic, breathless, and ceaseless. If the horses falter for even a moment, the shadows will swallow the light. Sometimes the wolves draw so close their teeth snap against the wheels, causing the sky to darken in a sudden, terrifying eclipse. The world below holds its breath until the chariots break free, sprinting once more toward the horizon. This desperate race keeps the cycles of day and night turning over Midgard, a beautiful yet terrifying order born from absolute necessity. The wolves run with a sharp, heavy, and gritted patience, knowing that time is on their side. They know that one day, when the threads of fate are fully unraveled, the horses will tire, the chariots will shatter, and the sun and moon will finally be torn down and consumed in the great darkness of Ragnarok. For now, the lights of heaven endure, casting their glow upon the middle world, where the first generations of humanity are beginning to build their hearts. The heavens were moving, and the earth was bathed in light and shadow. Now, the gods look down from their high seats upon the shores of Midgard, ready to breathe the spark of life into two drifting pieces of wood. Chapter 7. The Drifting Wood. The three sibling gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, walk along the desolate, wave-beaten shores of the newborn salt sea, their gaze surveying the vast, empty fields of Midgard. The mountains are fixed, the stars are burning in the dome above, and the oceans are locked behind their borders. Yet the middle world remains a silent, hollow wilderness, devoid of any mortal voice to praise the architecture of heaven. Rolling in the cold surf at their feet lie two drifting logs, cast ashore by the gray tides, one torn from a fallen ash tree, and the other from an elm. They are nothing but dead wood, hollowed out by the brine, shapeless and heavy with the salt of the sea. Yet, within their fibers lies a hidden, dormant potential that catches the sharp, heavy, and gritted focus of the All-Father. The three gods bend down over the sand, their posture filled with an unyielding, fierce authority as they reshape the wood, carving the rough bark into the likeness of the gods themselves. Odin steps forward first, leaning close to the carved logs, his voice dropping into a solemn, heavy breath of creation. He breathes into them the spark of life, the spirit and the enduring soul, awakening their bloodlines and setting their hearts beating against their newly formed ribs for the very first time. Then Vili touches their brows, granting them the quickened gifts of wit, moving will, and deep human feeling. Finally, Ve strokes their faces, and a sudden, frantic, and breathless wonder fills the shore. He gives them the senses to perceive the world, warm flesh, hearing ears, and deep blue eyes that open to look upon the midday sun. He gives them the gift of speech, and their voices ring out across the empty clay, shattering the ancient, primordial silence. They name the man Ask, carved from the sturdy ash, and the woman Embla, shaped from the flexible elm, the first parents of all human generations. The gods clothe them in fine garments and lead them into the protected heart of the middle yard, granting them absolute domain over the fertile fields of Midgard. Here they will build their hearts, cultivate the soil, and raise their seeds, safely locked behind the wall of Ymir's eyelashes, while the shadow of the great world tree looms large above their small timber roofs. Chapter 8. The Golden Shallows of the Mind. With humanity settled in the valleys of Midgard, the gods return to their radiant citadel of Asgard, gathering in the central plain of Yggdrasil to establish an age of absolute splendor. They build mighty furnaces, hammering out tools of pure gold, and construct great gaming tables of precious metal, where they play with loaded dice, laughing as the sun glints off the polished surfaces of their palaces. In this golden dawn of the cosmos, the mind is a wide, untroubled shallow, free from the heavy rust of worry or the dark stains of betrayal. The walls of Asgard are not yet built, for the gods possess an unyielding, fierce pride that assumes no enemy would ever dare to cross the shining borders of heaven. Peace seems as permanent as the roots of the world tree. But the golden dice cannot roll forever without attracting the gaze of older, darker forces lurking in the outer wilderness. From the jagged, frozen crags of Jotunheim come three monstrous giant maidens, stepping silently through the morning mists into the central plain. Their presence introduces a sharp, heavy, and gritted weight into the bright air of heaven. They represent the slow creeping of time, the inevitability of decay, and the raw greed that turns golden peace into an iron struggle for survival. The moment their heavy boots touch the grass of Yggdrasil, the golden age fractures, and a sudden, frantic, and breathless realization ripples through the assembly of the Æsir. The dice stop spinning. The gold begins to tarnish in the sun. The innocence of the dawn is swallowed up in a single moment. The gods look upon one another with a sudden, panicked suspicion, realizing they are no longer alone in the great architecture of creation. The outer dark has found a path to the inner court, and the long, violent history of the cosmos has truly begun. Odin takes his seat upon Hliskjalf, the high throne that looks into all the 9 distinct worlds, his features settling into a solemn, unyielding gaze. The playtime of the young gods is ended. The shadows are growing longer, and we must forge a harder destiny if we are to hold the pillars of heaven against the rising tide. Let the dwarf smiths be summoned from their dark caverns. Let them shape the first weapons of war, and let the walls of heaven be drawn in stone. For the great peace is dead, and the age of iron is at hand. Chapter 9. The Bound Beast. As the Golden Age fades into an era of iron vigilance, the gods watch with growing dread as a monstrous cut matures within the very courts of Asgard. Fenrir, the great wolf sired by Loki, grows at a terrifying pace, his jaws expanding until they can bridge the gap between earth and sky. Only Tyr, the god of single-handed honor, possesses the fierce courage to step forward daily to feed the beast its raw meat. The Norns issue a grave, unyielding warning from the sacred well. If this slavering terror is left to roam free, it will eventually tear down the pillars of heaven and swallow the All-Father himself. Yet the laws of Asgard are absolute. No holy ground can be defiled with the monster's blood. The gods must rely on cunning rather than steel, devising a series of games to trick the wolf into heavy, iron fetters under the pretense of testing its raw strength. Fenrir easily shatters the massive iron chains, lading Indromi with a single, effortless flex of his massive hind legs, his mocking howl echoing through the mountains. Desperate, Odin sends a messenger deep into the smoky labyrinth of Nidavellir, commissioning the master-smith dwarfs to craft an unbreakable tether. With a sharp, heavy, and gritted magic, they forge Gleipnir. It looks like nothing more than a smooth, silky ribbon. Yet it is woven from 6 impossible things. The sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. The gods lead the suspicious wolf to the lonely island of Lyngvi, daring him to try his strength against this fragile-looking thread. The wolf senses the trick. His nostrils flare as he smells the dark sorcery woven into the silk. "I will not let this ribbon bind me," the beast snarls, "unless one of you places your right hand inside my jaws as a pledge of absolute good faith." The gods freeze in a sudden, breathless panic, all except Tyr, who calmly steps forward and wedges his hand between those terrifying, jagged teeth. Fenrir lashes out, straining against the ribbon. But the harder he kicks, the tighter the silky cords pull, locking his limbs in an inescapable embrace. Realizing he is trapped, the wolf clamps his jaws shut, severing Tyr's hand at the wrist in a sickening, bloody crunch. The gods let out a great shout of triumph, driving a heavy sword straight through the beast's open jaws, pinning his tongue to the roof of his mouth. There he will remain, bound and foaming in the dark, until the world cracks open at the dawn of Ragnarok. Chapter 10. The Twilight Whispers. The bound beast howls on his lonely island. his bitter saliva pooling into a river of dark despair that winds through the lower valleys of the cosmos. A heavy, fragile stillness settles over the 9 distinct worlds, an era where the architecture of heaven stands fortified, yet the air itself grows thin and cold with the anticipation of a final reckoning. High upon his throne, Odin looks across the vast tiers of existence, his single eye reflecting the dimming light of the stars. He sees the walls of Midgard weathering under gray rains. He feels the roots of Yggdrasil trembling under the persistent teeth of the serpent below. The cosmos is aging, its grand scaffolding locked in an unyielding, fierce battle against time. Deep in the twilight of Valhalla, the chosen warriors sharpen their iron blades, their voices rising in a solemn chant that echoes off the golden shields of the roof. The shadows are lengthening. The wolves in the sky are closing the gap behind the chariots. The rhythm of the chase is turning frantic and breathless. Every god keeps a hand resting near his weapon, waiting for the sudden, devastating blast of the Gjallarhorn that will signal the fracturing of the burning bridge. Loki sits in the shadows of the council hall, his smile holding a sharp, heavy, and gritted malice as he watches the golden threads of the Norns begin to fray. Let the young gods count their victories while they can. The ice of Niflheim is expanding, and the fires of Muspelheim are stoking their furnaces to a blinding heat. The ancient bloodline of Ymir will have its absolute vengeance, and no wall of eyelashes can keep the final winter from devouring the world. The great world tree sways in the cosmic wind, its leaves whispering the secret names of things to come, holding the 9 worlds steady until the final horn sounds. The final, devastating echoes of Ragnarok have faded into absolute silence, leaving the ash and fire of the burning cosmos to cool beneath a dark, seamless sky. The heavy, black ocean has swallowed the scorched remains of the flat earth, washing away the bloodline of giants and the broken armor of fallen gods, leaving the vast expanse of the world sea calm and untroubled once more. Yet the spine of existence remains unbroken, deep within the protected heart of Yggdrasil, where the fire of search could not pierce. The spark of life has been kept pure. 2 mortals, Leif and Niflheim, awaken from their long slumber within the great ash tree, nourished by nothing but the morning dew. They look out upon the quiet waters with an unyielding, fierce hope, their deep blue eyes reflecting the dawn of a new age. From the gray depths of the sea, the earth begins to rise a second time, turning a fresh, vibrant green beneath the newborn sun. Look there! Cascades of sweet water break from the mountaintops. The golden eagle spreads its wings over the high crags to hunt for fish. The fields bring forth a harvest without a single grain being sown. A sudden, frantic, and breathless joy rippling through the valleys as the ancient frozen winter of the soul is lifted from the clay forever. On the radiant plain of Yggdrasil, where the gilded halls of Asgard once stood, the surviving gods gather in the fresh grass. Vidar and Vali return from the shadows, joined by the sons of Thor bearing their father's mighty hammer. And from the dark kingdom of Hel, Balder, the beautiful, and his brother, Hoder, emerge into the absolute light, their ancient wounds healed. They sit together in the warm sun, speaking of the great myths, the bound wolf, and the ancient runes of the All-Father. Stooping down into the tall grass, their fingers brush against something solid. The golden gaming pieces of the ancient gods, long lost, but now restored to their hands. The sharp, heavy, and gritted struggles of the old world are gone, leaving only a beautiful, minimalist canvas where a new generation will trace the lines of destiny under a canopy of clear, quiet stars.